there's a fundamental belief that pro songwriters have that you can always make your lyrics better. There's always a way. And so instead of asking yourself, are my lyrics done? Like, could I make them better? The question is, how can I make them better?
Yeah.
Because it's not a question of possibility. It's a question of execution. So just a little tip. Change your wording in your mind and you'll likely come up with a different solution for lyrics. I've always struggled with lyrics, so I found that extremely helpful. So welcome to the Prolific Super Producer Podcast. My name is Tyson. This is my other co-host.
Your host? This is your host? I'm taking over, everyone. Yes, Nathan,
man.
what's up?
We're two people. We're doing a podcast to help you make your songs sound like a professional and ultimately be professional if that's what your goal is in music. So right off the bat, I want to give something to you that's going to be super helpful with this episode. This episode, we're going to be talking about how to make your demos sound like pro songs. You know, after you actually write the song, you want it to sound decent so you can show other people. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And along with that, I want to give you a free course that I made just for this podcast to be able to mix songs like a professional. So this will help you get the foundational knowledge and mindset that you need to be able to mix songs professionally. So you can go get that course at promixformula.com, and it will forward you to the page where you can actually get access to that course totally free. My gift to you for watching or listening to this podcast. So with that, let's dive into the episode. What is a demo? First of all, we need to define terms here. What is a demo versus a finished product versus just whatever you have recorded on your iPhone that was the initial beginnings of the song? So, Nathan, what is a demo?
Yeah, let's start there, shall we? Okay, so a demo is typically, it's kind of like, I think like people can think demos mean a lot of different things. I think at its base form, a demo is just a sample recording of like what the final song should roughly sound like. Like it's a encapsulation of the vision. Like you've caught the vision, you're not, you know what I mean? Like you have enough fleshed out to where you know how you want to finish it. So, and for a lot of different artists, I think that can take different shapes and forms, right? Like maybe some artists need a more completed demo, which is kind of like a funny thing to say, like a completed demo. But like, something that's a little more fleshed out to remember where they wanted to take the song. That's kind of the thing that I like will center on is like a demo is, and it's just enough of the song idea that you can remember where you want to take it, and you're not so focused on what to add or what to capture. You're done capturing inspiration. That part's over, and now you're just focusing on, okay, everything's here. All the pieces of the puzzle are here. It's time to kind of put them together in their best light. And a demo is, I think, the step before a pro song. So, like, if you got something on your phone that's just like you recorded your guitar and a little bit of gibberish or something like that, that's kind of like a sketch. Like that's just an idea. That's like the starting point for something. But then a demo could be a more fleshed out version of the sketch where maybe it's not just your guitar and mumbling. You actually have a little bit of lyrics in there. You got another instrument or two in there. A little bit of song structure is happening. That's kind of, to me at least, that's how I view my own demos. And that's how I view demos with people I'm working with is like, hey, we're just about there. We've captured everything. We know the direction we're going to head. Now we can kind of rest easy a little bit and focus on fine-tuning and focus on what we need to complete the track. So what do you think, Tyson, like especially on your end, like because you're mixing people's tracks, you're mastering people's tracks, you've been in the process like that and you're working with artists and developing artists. So what's a demo like for you in your world?
Yeah, so demos, I think the further along you get in your skill set and your just journey as a musician, I think they tend to be more and more completed. So if you listen to pitches from songwriters, so like in Nashville, the songwriting scene is huge, right? And so they're always constantly writing these songs. They work with a producer to just say, hey, like, can you basically make this into a demo, right? They have maybe an acoustic guitar in their vocal, and then the producer will go, like, they'll, find some drums, slap some drums on there, add some bass and some banjo or whatever, and be like, okay, we got our folk song, together. Yeah, and that's that's their version of a demo. But to break it down to its simplest form, a demo is something that you can give to a stranger so that they understand your song and the direction you're trying to go. That's ultimately what a demo is to me, and I think a very functional definition, because a demo then could be just your vocal and an acoustic guitar if that translates into the ultimate final version of the song, meaning you know what direction you're going. Maybe there's going to be some like cinematic like strings in the background or whatever, right? That doesn't need to be in the demo because you still have the structure of the song, you still have the lyrics, you still have the melody or the main melodies, right? There's always changes that happen between the demo and the final song, but ultimately it's the ability to communicate easily to a stranger what the song is and where it's trying to go.
I love that. I think, like, would you say a demo more often than not will have at least completed lyrics? Not that they're necessarily the one that the artist is going to stick with, but like a chorus is at least written. A verse one and verse, like there's a song written. It doesn't mean that all the words are staying. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I would say that minimum you need a chorus.
Okay.
You need the hook of the song and the chorus. Those two things, if you don't have those things, you don't really have a song, in my opinion.
100%.
And so if you have those things, though, like verses, I constantly rewrite verses after the demo. So the next song that I plan on releasing as of filming this, I rewrote the verses 3 times. 2 of those times were after the final demo was done.
Okay, there it is.
So
yeah.
I don't think you need final lyrics.
Yeah, 100%.
By any means.
I was curious about that. So for me, like, I feel like I'm a little hardcore. Like, and maybe it's just like the scene and sessions I grew up in. It was like we wouldn't leave the room unless there was at least something down. So that's kind of like, for me, it's like, oh, it's not a demo unless I've got for sure a chorus. Like 80% of the verses are there, and then maybe a little gibberish fills in a spot or something. But like, I feel like, again, it goes back to, you said it perfectly, it's like your experience level. I really think that plays a role in how fleshed out a demo, because probably if we're going to reference someone like, I don't know, like a Max Martin or a Ryan Tedder or whoever, there's a big artist, a big songwriter, producer like that, their demo compared to like someone just starting their first year of making songs, they're gonna feel different. You know what I mean? They're like 100%. So I think maybe what matters more, if you're listening, it doesn't, no matter where you're at in your music journey of making songs in your bedroom, I think it's more like, hey, did you capture the idea? Are you done? Are you not stressing about like finding inspiration for your song anymore? That's kind of my barometer, is like, oh, okay, I did all the capturing. I did all the vibe finding. I've got the whatever. Like, you just have most of the pieces in place so that when you revisit your song the next day, you've created enough to pick up from to go forward to carry your song through to the finish line. That's kind of like how I would explain it to people.
Yeah, I think that's a good functional use of a demo for yourself,
right?
Because you're communicating to your future self what the direction of the song was. I don't want to confuse like your preference of workflow as a listener, like your preference of workflow versus everybody else's functional definition of a demo. Because, and I know we're kind of harping on the definition of a demo a lot, but it's actually really important to understand these differences, especially when you're collaborating with other people. And so is that if you have a preference to have completed lyrics on your demo before you continue that are the final lyrics for your song, that's just a preference. That's not a necessity for your 100%. Demo to be effective and do what it needs to do. So
so it's a sliding scale. It's a sliding scale, and you kind of need to get to define that. But it's important to define it, like we're saying, because then how do you know when the song is done? Because I think a lot of people get to the demo and are like, it's good. They like release it. And so it's good to know actually like where the actual finish line is if you're trying to take this thing seriously and create songs that are resonating with people and getting out there and sound professional. Yeah, professionals go past, there's some steps past the demo stage. Awesome for getting to the demo spot. A lot of people don't even get to that. But it's important to know that that's not the finish line. It means you're close, but it's not the end. Yeah.
Let's transition. So that's a demo. What is a pro song now? So what is the actual difference between this demo and the pro song? Because, demos could be, so for myself, like I have a relatively mixed and like loud demo because I have enough skill as a mixing and mastering engineer that I can make it sound, 80% of the way there to a pro song really fast. And I think that it confuses people when they hear a demo like of that quality versus, you know, another demo that has like no plugins on it, no processing at all, and it's just really quiet. Like it's obvious, like, oh, like that's just a demo. It's not that good. But and it ranges, right? You know, there's a sliding scale somewhere there.
Yes.
And so, but even if I'm 80% of the way there, for my songs, I'm always going to like not keep that mix. It's not a useful mix to me, other than possibly a reference when I'm later in the final mix. But ultimately, I'm going to remove any processing that I did. I'm going to export those tracks to a different session and then start mixing it for the final version. And actually, more than likely, I'm going to re-record 99% of that song and then start mixing it, right? The demo version does not, elements of the demo version don't make it into the final song.
Yeah. So like what's the checklist, right? Like, okay, completed version of a song, like what is that? I guess again, people can just have a whole bunch of opinions, but who cares? Like what's a completed song? What's in there? Checklist that people could say.
And so I would say that this checklist is driven by the recording, right? So you have a demo version, you have a recording of your song, but it's probably not the most ideal recording of your song. So what we want to do is we want to take it from that demo version to the final version. And what we need to do is, first of all, we need to finish our lyrics. If we don't have any, you know, if we're missing a bridge or if our verses just like need to be tightened up a little bit, all of that will need to be completed for the final version of the song. It's kind of self-explanatory, but it's worth thinking about, like, okay, are these lyrics actually done?
Yeah.
How can they be better?
Yes.
That's another thing that I just actually was talking to a songwriter yesterday, which I thought was really ingenious. Side note here. But when you're completing your lyrics, there's a fundamental belief that pro songwriters have that you can always make your lyrics better. There's always a way. And so instead of asking yourself, are my lyrics done? Like, could I make them better? The question is, how can I make them better?
Yeah.
Because it's not a question of possibility. It's a question of execution. So just a little tip. Change your wording in your mind and you'll likely come up with a different solution for lyrics. I've always struggled with lyrics, so I found that extremely helpful.
That is so helpful. And to like go off that rabbit trail even more. So like something that I will do or started doing when even just creating melodies is the vocal track that I have in my DAW, I rename it. So like I do the gibberish take, right? Then I create another track and I name the track Beat It. So it's like a mental reminder, okay, I'm going to try to beat my own gibberish. There's not even words yet. If I could think of a word to take the place, I'll do it. But like just that idea of, okay, fleshing this out a little bit more, like you can do that through any part of the process if you so desire. It's like it can feel a little brutal to force yourself to like beat your melodies and beat your lyrics. But I mean, let's be real. That's how with anything in life, that's how you get better, right? It's like forcing yourself to do a little bit more and like try something a different way. So that's a really good like little tip there. I like that.
Yeah, and I think that kind of goes along with like turning your demo into the pro song, right? Recording wise, because a lot of people that I find, like I was this way too, right? Once I finished a song and I got it to the demo stage, I'm like, oh, this is the final version. Like, it's so good, right? I was like so excited about it, which is awesome. But at the same time, I didn't really realize, like, oh, there's this whole other step that I could take that would like bring this up to the next level.
Yes.
And it's not like this massive step of like, you know, from, you know, 25% of the way done to 80% of the way done. It's like 75% of the way done to 85% of the way done. Right? It's not that much of a change really, because it's the same lyrics, the same melody, you know, most of the guitar parts are the same, or, you know, whatever. And instrumentation doesn't change that much. But by forcing yourself to like, okay, I have this demo version and it's somewhat sort of completed, and I'm going to make this other version of it. And naturally, you're going to have had either come up with new ideas for the song, or you're just going to like, oh, you know, that didn't quite turn out the way I wanted to in the demo, so I'm going to do it slightly different in the final version. All of these little tiny decisions, or even just spending more time with the song, you'll be able to execute the vocal performance better. Like that's a huge for me, because I'm not a very good singer, and so I need to practice a lot before I record anything. And so having the final version that like sounds kind of good is really helpful for me to be able to practice my vocal hundreds of times before I actually record the final version. So all of that plays into this process as well. But let's get back to our checklist. The first thing we said was completed lyrics.
Yes.
The second thing we need for a final pro song is the final melodies as well. Mm-hmm. So you have lyrics. Now you have the melodies that actually match those lyrics, mm-hmm. and those are all tightened up and...
Yeah, like when you're listening to your song, like you've chosen the melodies, like it's very clear. That can be a difference from a demo to a final is like, is some melody choices. And sometimes, everyone's process is different, but I feel like when everyone's attempting to write melodies, chances are you come up with more than one, right? So you have multiple ideas, and sometimes you just leave those multiple ideas in the demo for the sake of reminding yourself of where you were and ideas and directions you could take. But a final song is going to, like Tyson said, have a clear distinction, just like the lyric has been chosen, the concept has been established. This is the melody for the chorus, and it doesn't change from chorus 1 to chorus 2 most often, unless that's a creative decision. But like, you know what I mean? Like you're doing these polishing steps to, identify the verse melodies, identify the chorus melodies, make sure that everything is hitting and tight and in the same way. That's another big, a check that you can make on your list of like, okay, everything is succinct. You know what I mean? With the lyrics and the melody, because that's the song. I mean, the music obviously plays a big part, but the lyrics and the melody, that's where the story is coming from. And like we've talked about multiple times, the production and everything you add, harmonies, anything like that, like it can all support the story, but your lyrics and your melody, those are the vehicles you're using to say what you got to say, So we want to make sure that those two things are prioritized and that those two things are set, I think, before moving on to, okay, how can we finalize instrumentation, add things, all that kind of stuff.
I get unless you want to get really nerdy, like Tyson, and you want to start testing all of your different melodic ideas to see which one's the best.
That's right.
Because that's what I do. Okay.
What episode was that? So we could tell people.
I don't remember what episode I talked about that.
Hey, you never know.
Just binge the rest of the podcast, and then you'll find it.
You'll find it
somewhere.
Yes. Save it for that road trip,
Oh, I think we say it in episode 17, which hasn't happened yet.
Okay, well, then I guess we're good then.
All right, that's just a little Easter egg. They'll find out later.
Yeah, right. I love it.
All right. Okay, so we have complete lyrics, final melodies. What's next? We also have harmonies. So even though you have your lead vocal, sounds great, you've got your catchy melody, your nice hooks in there that you repeat a whole bunch to keep people's attention in your song, you also need harmonies to accentuate that, right? You want to be able to add a couple harmonies to the title of the song that's in the chorus, right? To make sure that pops out of the production, or just to maybe thicken up their vocal because it's a little bit weak all alone out there standing without any additional harmonic information. Anything to add there, Nathan?
Oh, I would just say don't sleep on harmonies. Like I did for far too long. And, it wasn't until I had, a mentor to kind of like, who was really good at harmonies and used them, and he would say, hey, mate, like, why don't you ever use any harmonies? And to be honest, I was like, I just hadn't thought about it. I was like, wait, what's a harmony? Like, what is that, an instrument? Is that a VST? I don't have the VST. It was like, what is this? It's like, no, like with your voice, with your vocals and stuff. And I was like, oh. So I would just say, to encouragement for anyone out there, like if you haven't messed around with harmonies yet, or even if they feel a little mysterious to you and you can't really figure it out quite yet, like keep at it. Don't shy away from adding harmonies, because like Tyson said, I wish that we could hear, any of these like massive songs that have just like stood the test of time, that are still popular and still getting plays and streams like now, that as they were like 10 years ago or something. Like all these big songs that hang around, if we could just isolate the vocal stems, there's going to be harmonies in there. And there's probably going to be harmonies in places that you were like, I didn't even really hear that necessarily, but it was there. And like Tyson said, it's the perfect glue. It's the perfect thickening agent. And it can also be a good expressive tool also. That's how I love using harmonies, is like even over certain words in a verse, or especially in a chorus, and emphasizing certain things. It can really come alongside. It's like the steroid injector, I feel like, to melodies. Like if you have a really good melody, if you have the right harmony over it too, it can just drive home that lyric even more. So that's my 2 cents on harmonies, just because of I stayed away from them for too long.
Yeah, I mean, I avoided harmonies for a long time too, but that was because I wasn't very good at singing them.
Okay, yeah, fair enough.
So it's hard, but I would also encourage you, if you're not very good at singing harmonies, don't let that be a reason that you don't do it. Because even myself, I'm still not very good at harmonies. I can still not pick them up very well, like in my brain, and be able to like just produce them. So like some artists will like walk into the studio and they'll just be able to just own it. They can sing like 6 harmonies over the same vocal. I'm like, I don't even know there was that many harmonies.
Yeah,
like possible.
Yeah.
But so there's vocalists like that. But if you're not like that, if you're more like me and you're just terrible at being able to pick out harmonies and be able to sing them, then what I would recommend is using plugins like Melodyne or Autotune, and just move the note around until you find a good harmony that sounds nice in your production, and then do that for all the notes in whatever line you want to sing the harmony, and then sing to that. So you still have a separate take. You're not just like keeping the Melodyne, weird version, the one that sounds like a robot, but you're still singing the actual line, but it allows you to be able to follow something, and then that makes singing melodies so much easier. And then you'll be able to like really level up your productions by adding these really nice, colorful harmonies that really sound pro.
Ninja hack. Yeah, I love Autotune for even melody creation, harmony creation, because you don't have to, it just frees you from being perfect. And I think vulnerability is the key to coming up with melodies and harmonies and stuff, is like to just let go. So if you can just let something as simple as a pitch correction tool help save your voice, it can help capture where you wanted your voice to go and put it in the right spot. And then, of course, like Tyson said, you don't have to keep the T-Pain sounding vocal. Like, you can get in there and like actually sing that note. But hey, at least the Autotune helps you find it. You know what I mean? It helps you identify what sounds good. Again, another ninja hack right there. Let's go.
All right, so let's wrap up what makes a pro song.
Let us.
Last thing is final instrumentation. So after you have your complete lyrics, final melodies, harmonies, you also need final instrumentation. So this is going to be, you have all of your lead guitars, you have all of those like little ear candy, synths in the background. You have all of those, fun little licks on the guitar that you wanted to add, but you didn't do it in the demo. Things like that. All of that needs to be in your final song and ready for the mixing engineer to take and start doing. Another thing I would add is that a final pro song is going to be edited. So a lot of times your demo version is not very edited, so your guitars are like a little bit sloppy here and there. Like your rhythm guitars aren't quite in time, locking in with the drums. But in the final version, they are, because they were edited. So maybe you didn't get the perfect take, but your editor, or if you're editing your song, like you just nudge those notes over to make sure that they really lock in with whatever other instruments are playing at that point in time. So that's another note that I would throw in here on instrumentation. And then the very last one, bonus here, if you have electric guitars in your production, take the entire guitar track and nudge it back between 10 and 20 milliseconds. Because for whatever reason, guitars sound incredible when they are just barely delayed and barely late. It's like, I think it has to do with the actual transient information. So the like hit of the note, the impact, because when your drums are playing, it allows like a little bit more space for the drums, and then your guitars kind of like come out of that, and it makes more of an impact. I don't know exactly like why or how necessarily, but I've just found that whenever I move those, especially rhythm guitars, back just a hair, it just really opens up that production. It feels like it locks in, and it feels much more like a pro song. So again, that's an advanced tip or trick for you, but but it does add like a little bit of character. So if you're at that level where you're really trying to eke out the last percentage points of your production, that can be a really powerful thing to do if you have heavy electric rhythm guitars.
Love that. That's so good. I want to try that now.
All right. So this episode was called 4 Steps to Make Your Demo Sound Like a Pro Song. And we haven't even got to the 4 steps yet. We just defined what a pro song is and what a demo is. So let's dive into the actual steps here. Let's get practical. Step 1. What is step 1, Nathan?
Okay, step 1, right, is just the vibe. This is the vibe. And vibe is just like getting the tone right, setting the scene. You're coming up with the colors, your color palette for your canvas, so to speak, right? So in the vibe section is just coming up with the idea. It's just finding something that inspires you, and that usually can take the form of some sort of instrumentation. So whether that's you with your instrument that you're plugging right in, or it's maybe, hey, it's just you and your instrument, you're not even inside a DAW yet, but that's your color, that's your palette that you're using. So, and sound selection is a big thing here too. Like, I think this is a overlooked step. So like in my world, and I'm talking to people and encouraging people with like helping them with their songs and stuff, if people aren't feeling too good about their song where it is right now, I've learned that my first question needs to be, how long did you spend setting it up? Like, how long did you spend dialing things in? And it's usually not very long. And okay, like some songs happen like that. Like sometimes we've all maybe had at least one of these, right? Where it just kind of flows through you and you're like, oh, wow, there's the whole song right there. If only that happened every time, right? But like more often than not, it doesn't happen like that. And I've learned that it's worth spending your time in this very beginning part of the process, like not rushing to get to production. I've made that mistake so many times, right? But like spending your time at the very beginning and dialing in a vibe, which is just a collection of sounds. It's just like a spark of an idea that is, it's inspiring enough to like, you can't help but write. You can't help but continuing to like flesh it out and make it so. So instead of just picking a few chords that you were iffy on, I feel like iffy is like the enemy here. Like you actually need to be inspired by what you're writing. If you're kind of like, this is okay, but whatever, and you move on, I just think it presents you a whole lot of roadblocks and challenges that you have to get through to actually flesh out the song, because you're actually subconsciously you've identified by saying, I'm kind of into this, but I'm kind of not. You have 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door, So if you start your track with something that's inspiring, I think that's going to like carry you all the way through the rest of the steps that we're going to talk about. So spend time on your vibe, hang here for a little bit longer to really flesh things out, to dial things in. And you just want to get it get the vibe good enough to ground your vision in something real, right? To get that inspiration into something tangible, so that now you can, especially if you're inside a DAW, you can press save. How amazing is that? And you can just pull up this idea that you had that like you fleshed out, and now it's real, and it becomes like a trampoline for the next few steps. So after the vibe, what do you think, Tyson? Where do we move? Where do we move from the vibe after we've got that dialed in?
You have your vibe. You want to make sure that you have your vocals recorded. So vocals, right, usually the center of our song. We want them to have those down there so that we have a record of what we were thinking, right? Because that's the most important thing in a demo is the vocal, the melody mostly, right?
Yeah.
Even if we don't have final lyrics, we have some gibberish, we have a melody there, because that's what's going to create this song from just like a collection of instruments into a unified story, right? That's ultimately what we're trying to get to with our demo, is to tell that story in a way that we can communicate it to somebody else, right?
Yeah.
So once we have our vibe, we want to just get our vocals recorded. It doesn't matter if they sound good. It doesn't matter if you're completely out of tune. If you're like me and you aren't a very good singer, then just get it out there. Yes. And it's going to sound terrible, probably. But the advantage what we could do here is we can just slap on a vocal preset with some tuning already enabled. So I'm going to walk you through my entire vocal preset, and I'll tell you exactly how to set it up. Okay, so I use Slate Digital plugins in mine, so I'll give you specific plugins even. So in my vocal preset, I have the SSL console EQ that's emulated by Slate Digital, and I roll off about 3 decibels of 400 hertz, and then I boost the top end by 1 decibel. So the top shelf at like 6 kilohertz or something. Okay, so I roll off the mids, boost the top. That's it. And then I have a compressor, and that's going to be the LA2A emulation by Slate Digital, and I'm getting about 5 to 7 decibels of gain reduction, right around 6. Aim for 6, because that's just going to give you like a somewhat of a more pro sounding vocal, because most vocals are very, very compressed. So it just makes it sound a little bit more, together. And then the last step is I add a tuning plugin, and I use the Metatune from Slate Digital.
Oh yeah.
Every DAW has a tuning plugin, but I just prefer that one. I don't know, it's just the one I use. So
yeah.
Doesn't matter really what it is, and you don't have to use the specific plugins by any means at all. But with those 3 plugins, now my vocal is in tune it's compressed so it sounds more like a pro vocal. And then I fix the biggest issues that are always an issue with my vocals and my room. So I roll off some of those low mids that tend to build up a lot of this like muddy sounding vocal. So after those 3 moves, and feel free to copy that if you want, you might find some success with it. If you do that though, then all of a sudden my vocal sounds 75% of the way there.
Yes.
Even though my vocal take was awful, objectively awful, it doesn't sound awful when I actually listen back to it.
Yes.
So it's a really good trick of making sure you're keeping yourself motivated and in the flow and in the vibe. Because once you've worked so hard to get this vibe with all of your instrumentation, your sound selection, and then you dive into the vocals and you're like, oh, my vocals just sound like crap.
Yes.
It's demotivating. Like, you're not going to want to continue doing it. So make sure that you get a preset that works for you, that sounds good enough, that it keeps you, interested and motivated to continue writing and recording your song, because that is ultimately the biggest detractor, is just not being able to finish songs. So
yes.
Anything to add there, Nathan?
No, I love that. And that's like such a good hack. So really, like when you're coming up with your demo and you've got the step 1, step 2, you're getting your vibe, you're getting your vocals in there. Through this process, it's kind of you want to have as little roadblocks as possible in this initial part of the process, I believe, because and this is where having a preset like Tyson is talking about, where it's just one click and it's loaded up and you're just ready to go. You plug in the key of your song with the Autotune and you're off to the races, instead of, okay, what was that one instrument that I used that one time that sounded really cool in that song, but I didn't end up using it? Dude, good luck. I mean, that's like a scavenger hunt, you know what I mean? And you're like ready to create, but you're forcing yourself to get super technical and you're using the other side of your brain and you're slowly diminishing, that reserve that you have in your creativity. So if you can move quickly, fairly quickly, like I said, spend your time. It's like a balance. Spend your time, but move quickly. I really think that's critical for these first couple steps of creating something, instead of getting bogged down so much. And I almost wonder if this is the reason a lot of people don't finish songs, and me too. I know that a reason I wouldn't finish songs is actually, it's not because I made it 3/4 of the way through the song and I was almost done with it and I stopped. No. Usually most songs are finished when they've reached over halfway. For me, it was at the beginning. And I wonder if it's like that for other songwriters and other creators too. It's like, oh, it happens at the beginning. That's where shots were fired and you walked away and you closed down your DAW. It's because something happened, and maybe you got lost in technical know-how, maybe you got uninspired because you couldn't find that sound, maybe something happened just inside of your software, your computer shut down. You know what I mean? I think it's actually at this beginning place. So if you can do things and find systems and set up protocols for yourself to where you just open up the DAW and start creating, I think that in itself gives you a much better shot of turning your demo, of actually coming up with a demo, and then turning the demo into a finished song. So I love that. I think that's something to take note of. If you don't already have a plan in place, start to think of something, because I think it'll really help you.
Yeah, 100%. So just to recap with where we're at so far. So step 1, we got the vibe. We recorded, some initial instruments to be able to understand what we're kind of going after in terms of vibe, and something that inspires us to then record our vocals. We've recorded our vocals. We've come up with some, rough melody ideas and maybe some gibberish, maybe a lyric here and there. But ultimately now we have a song that has a vibe and lyrics, or a melody, I should say.
Yeah.
Vocals of some sort. So now step 3, we need to move on, right? We're still trying to work on our pro sounding demo, is we want to be able to arrange the song now in a way that makes sense, because we don't want to get too far down this vocal train before we come back to arranging, because what can happen is you can just take your instrumental, which with whatever it is right now, and assume that that's going to be the final version of the arrangement, and then you can end up with weird songs, like your verse is too long, or your chorus is too short, or you skipped a bridge and it's like, oh, it could have used a bridge here, but I didn't put one in there in my initial vibe stage, so I'm not going to do it, right?
Yes.
And I feel like at least for myself, sometimes the further along I get in the instrumentation, the less likely I'm going to come back and rearrange something.
Oh, yeah,
so the more
huge.
instruments there are, the less rearranging I'm ever going to do. So
Yes.
I think there's a kind of a balance here between like obviously getting the vibe and just getting it quickly and not using as many instruments or using as few instruments as possible or sounds as possible to, get the vibe that I want without over producing even in this stage.
Yes.
Because it'll be a detractor of your ability to refine your song later.
Oh, that's so good. I think at this part too, it's like another psychological hack, and I think that's huge when you're creating music. Is like to just be able to see. At least for me, I know this is true. If I open up my DAW and I see a fully mapped out song, doesn't mean it's done, but it means I can look and identify. Oh, it looks like a song. Verse, chorus, verse, chorus. It takes the shape of a track. I feel like that in itself is super motivating and super inspiring, as opposed to kind of like what Tyson was saying. And this, I've been guilty of this too, is like creating, a loop and then kind of staying within this 8 to 16 bar range of just like adding instruments and adding instruments and adding instruments and stuff. And it's like now I've got this big blob, this block of sounds, of sonics, which might be really cool. But then it's like, oh, wait, now how do I turn this into... This doesn't look like a song. This is just a piece of music, And I think a demo is you effectively moving from a piece of music to a song. It, like, looks like a song now. It's like with a building. If someone's building a building, it doesn't look like anything for a while because they're building a foundation and they're whatever, the grounds and all that kind of stuff. But once the scaffolding starts getting up and you see the framing and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be a house, or you can tell, oh, this is going to be an apartment building. Oh, or this is going to be a corporate building. Like you can tell what it's going to be. I think it's a similar thing with arrangement and even arrangement early on. Go ahead and give your sounds the shape of a song. It doesn't matter if it's the final stuff, but like get it to look like a track so that you psychologically are like, okay, cool. I'm working with a song. I make songs. I create song structure. You're like saying you're giving yourself such positive signals by doing that more instead of just living in a block of music, which I did for way too long.
That's a great tip. And I would also add to that just a really easy way to fill in those gaps, right? Because sometimes we'll end up with a chorus and we're like, okay, the chorus sounds good. Like the hook is awesome. And then we're like, I have no idea what to do for the verses.
Yeah.
And so this is a really common thing. My recommendation, if you have like zero idea of what else to do, just take your chorus and back it into the verses, but just simplify it. So if I have a full chorus and it has drums, bass, piano, guitar, maybe I'll take the basic version of the drums and I'll move that to my first verse.
Yeah.
And then I'll bring the piano and I'll put that over the top of it.
Yes.
And then that's my verse. And then I'll, move another basic version of the drums to the second verse, and then I'll bring my bass and my guitar or something.
Yeah.
Just simplify it. So have fewer elements in your verses just to like have something there that's like following the chord structure that you wanted, and is just a more basic version of the chorus, because obviously you always want your chorus to be bigger, and by having more elements in your chorus just by default is going to make it feel like there's some movement, there's some dynamics in your song, there's some other just creative things going on, because it's going to spark your imagination of like, oh, like this song is changing, it's moving over time, like how's that going to impact the story? Like it just sparks all these other creative ideas for you just by having something there, even if it's just a direct copy of your chorus or a simplified copy of your chorus.
Yeah. Love that. Rewind that whole little section. I mean, that is like a great way to just get so much further into a finished song, into a demo. Is I think a lot of the hang-ups happen early on. So this is some really tactical, practical advice that I think just works to get you closer, right? To get you out of the just music making phase and into song making, Man, okay, so if that was arranging, right, and we're trying to get a rough structure in place, again, even if it's not exactly what it's going to turn out to be, but at least you've got it in place. Step 4 is going to be like finalizing, you know what I mean? And like you probably call this mixing, which is really kind of in your territory, Tyson, but like you could please chime in here to fill in anything that I'm missing. But like if step 4 is finalize, think about mixing. We're just thinking about like volume balance. I think initially is like a great just first place to start. And I think it's approachable for anybody. Hey, just like, don't even worry about the plugins. Don't even worry about whatever. Just set everything in a way. Okay, the drums are sitting here, and then the music's kind of sitting here. Okay, what's popping out in the music that's a little distracting from the vocal? And it's like you just get it to sound right to your ears as a first good starting point. And then, of course, if you want to, bring it to life a little bit more, if you make anything louder, our ears naturally like, oh, it's legitimate, Unless you're like Tyson's ears, he can probably hear every single thing inside of there. But like, you can use some sort of limiting tool inside of your dots to kind of lift everything up a little bit. And now check out what you've done. You've gone all the way from a vibe all the way to finalizing. And now this is really like, I mean, you're just about all the way there because you've taken the time to get inspired. You've taken the time to put down some vocal melodies, maybe a little bit of gibberish lyrics in there, and you've done it in a way that's inspiring, so you're pumped about it. That's key. You're pumped about it at this point. You're pumped about it going into arranging, and now you've got this psychological stuff like working on your side because you see a song. It looks like a song, and I like how it sounds. This is amazing. You ride that into finalizing, a little bit of volume balance, bumping it up a little bit, and you're like, oh wow, I just did a track today, and like that's the kind of behavior that you need to take on and the kind of habits that you need to take and change in order to consistently at least get to the demo and then finalizing, get to the demo, finalize. And that's the process you can repeat to churn out tracks, and get away from just getting away from not even making it to the demo, So I guess when it comes to finalizing, Tyson, anything you want to like throw in there, any gems you have about volume balance and limiting or any of that stuff?
Yeah, there's definitely some really killer tips that I have for you. So the very first thing is that I recommend using as few plugins as possible. So because this is very tempting to like, okay, I have like somewhat sort of a finished song and I want to make it sound as finalized as possible, but you can definitely lean too far on the mixing side, like the finalizing side. I spend maybe 20 minutes on this. Maybe, right? It's very quick, very short. Use your gut of like, okay, this just sounds awful. I need to add some EQ here, or this is obviously too quiet. I need to bring it up. Those are the types of things that I'm doing in this process. I am not going in depth. I'm not putting compressors on very many things. I'm not, adding this like distortion on my vocal or whatever. I don't do that kind of stuff. I rely on the presets that I already have on my sounds themselves, and then I also rely on just volume balancing. And when you're talking about volume balancing, this is basically just setting the fader levels in your DAW. If you're not sure what volume balancing means, it just means that I'm doing nothing but changing the faders, okay? The volume faders. And the most powerful tip and just shift in your mind that you can make to make sure that your volume balance is just amazing is view it as distance. So instead of thinking what's louder, what's softer, think of what's closer to me and what's further away from me. So one of the most helpful tips that I've done for my students that I teach mixing is when you're sitting down to do your volume balance, imagine that you're sitting on a baseball diamond and you're the umpire, and all of your elements are players on the field. And you want to have the main players as closer to you and then the less main players further away. And so you want to be able to then think about, okay, if my vocal is the main element of my song, I'm going to bring that, and he's going to be, like the catcher, basically. And then say my snare drum's also a main person, so he's going to be the hitter, he's or whoever's up at bat. And then you're moving these elements though in distance. And so what you can do, so now my vocal is like right in front of me, I can think, okay, my acoustic guitar should not be as loud as my vocal, but I want it to be, still like relatively present. So maybe that's going to be like the shortstop or whatever. And so then I'm going to move my guitar up. I'm going to keep moving the fader up until it feels like he's, relatively behind the vocal, but not too far. Right. Mm-hmm. So you can use the elements you've already established in relation to other elements. And it's easier if I draw it out, but hopefully that makes a lot of sense in terms of just like view it as distance not loudness, because loudness people don't really understand most of the time, right? Until you've done this for a long time, like loudness can be confusing. But distance is something that we all inherently know. Like if you hear a voice that's far away versus close to you, you can immediately tell. It's like instinctual. We know exactly if that is, unless you're like my friend who only has one ear, then you can always tell distance. So anyway, all that being said, that's the way that I would view volume balance, and I would focus on volume balance. Don't focus on any plugins. It uses few plugins as possible, like maybe a reverb on your vocal, and that's it. Outside of that, as Nathan mentioned, limit your demo just so it's loud, because that's going to make you feel more good about your song. It's just that trick of louder things inherently sound better to humans, period. Yeah. That's why the loudness wars, if you've ever heard of that, the loudness wars happened because humans liked loud things. And so in comparison, if I hear one sound versus another sound, one's louder and one's quieter, I'm going to like the louder version more, period.
Yes.
That's just all else being equal. Yes. But just recognize you're also sacrificing dynamics, but that's a whole different conversation. This is a demo. We don't care about dynamics. Just squash it. All right.
Just blast it and go bump it in your car, man, and celebrate the fact that you got here. Yes.
Honestly, do it. All right.
That's where you go.
That is the number 4. That is the 4th step. So just real quick recap again. Vibe, vocals, arranging, finalizing.
Boom.
VAF is our acronym.
Yeah, write that down.
With 2 V's.
Yes,
2 V's. Okay.
2 V's.
So one last note before we let you go, though, I do want to mention this, is that sometimes you'll come up with a demo, and especially if it sounds good, you might shoot yourself in the foot. Let me explain. Because your demo sounds so good now that you followed our process, and it's loud, it's dynamic, it has the right vibe, and it sounds good. Now you might end up listening to that demo way too much, and you probably will, because it's your song, and it's your song baby, and everybody's obsessed with their own babies. Yes. So if you have a demo and you listen to it too much, at least recognize that you've done that, because you probably have contracted a disease. And this disease is called Demoitis, because you've listened to your demo so much that that specific version of the song is now ingrained in you as the correct version. So if you then go to finalize that version and then have like a mixing engineer work on it, and then he sends it back to you, it could sound 1,000 times better than your demo, but you're not going to like it because it doesn't sound like the demo that you fell in love with.
Yes.
Okay? So just recognize that this is a huge issue, and I deal with it on a daily basis with artists I work with, because they're constantly like upset that it doesn't sound like the demo. And the better your demo sounds, the more likely this is to occur. So just be aware of that, and try to be as objective as possible. One, don't listen to your song on repeat forever, because it doesn't help you. It's not valuable for you. The more objective you can be throughout the entire process, the more likely you are going to come up with a really, really great song. Anything to add there, Nathan?
No, I think you nailed it. Like, if there's one thing, honestly, to like take away from this episode is like to learn how to navigate demoitis. And the way I don't think the solution is to like try to avoid it. I mean, do your best. Like, there's things that you can do to distance yourself from your track and remain objective. I think all that's true. But it's just like, it's unavoidable. If you make songs, if you make your own music, especially if you're this rare breed of who we're talking to here, if you're a bedroom super producer, right? Like, you're doing everything. Like, you were there. I feel like this is like Lord of the Rings or something. Like, I was there when it was written. You know, like, you're there when the song was literally crafted from its inception. And you've been with, like Tyson says, your song baby all the way through the whole process to this demo where you're bumping it in your car. You are very close to this thing. You are very close to this thing, and it makes it more difficult because hopefully you're making authentic music. That's what we would encourage you to do. So hopefully you do feel attached to it. You should feel attached to this thing that you created. It's just you can become so attached that that's all you see, and you have tunnel vision, and that's where it can hurt you. So do your best to stay objective, but also just recognize, okay, it's probably going to happen. Like you're going to get it. Like Tyson said, it's a consistent thing. It's a consistent thing for me as well. And you're going to learn ways for your own personality and you use a creative to like avoid that and like, kind of boundaries you need to set with yourself. But at the same time, I'm tempted not to say this, but I think it could be helpful for somebody because it's just going to sound hypocritical. But at the same time, there's probably some sort of magic in your demo. I don't know how to say it. Like, there's probably some sort of magic in your demo. So hear me. Yes, you can contract this disease, demoitis, and you can suffer from it, and it can hurt you. If you're handing your stuff, if you're outsourcing, if you're handing stuff off to other people, you came up with your demo and say that you're outsourcing to especially someone like a producer, and then they have it mixed and mastered or something for you. It can change. Stuff can change. This is absolutely real. This has happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to Tyson, where the magic that you caught in your song and why it was so meaningful to you, it lost its power when you handed it off to somebody else. That's a real thing that can happen, but it's important to tether that with, do you trust who you're handing it off to, and is it changing in a good way, or did it really change in a bad way? Because if it is more presentable now and more digestible because someone did a great mix on your work, but you just don't like that the 808 isn't loud enough or something or whatever, it's like, okay, that's, you know what I'm saying? So you have to find the balance. I hope I'm not spinning in circles here, where it's a middle ground between your demo is magical. Yes, you should be attached to it. It can inform you of a direction to take it if you're handing it off to someone, but at the same time, you're very close to it. And so you got to be careful. You have to be careful with how far you're going to cling to that thing.
Yeah, I would add to that or agree with that point, because we've all heard that band that did an acoustic version of a song on an album as a B track or B-roll, whatever you call that, B-side track. There we go.
Yeah.
And then it turned out to be one of their more popular songs. And then they're like, oh, this actually had legs. And then they redo that version on their next album or something and redo that song in a more polished format, fully produced and whatever else. And it's just not as good. It doesn't have that spark that everybody loved in the original version. So I don't think that is to be, a better produced song is not always going to be better.
Sure. Yes.
And recognize that, but also recognize that you're so close to your song that you may not be able to recognize when that is or is not the case. So I would trust the people around you who are in music and that you also trust their opinion.
Yeah.
And I would lean into that, because ultimately at the end of the day, their opinion is going to be more objective than yours and likely more accurate than yours at this point in time, because you've contracted this disease, right? Anybody who's ever been in a fever of any magnitude, you're not in your right mind at that moment.
No.
And so that's exactly what's happening here. But still saying that there could be magic that you want to hold on to. So
yeah, 100%. So along the lines of, taking a demo from a demo to a final song, right? I think a final song is what a lot of us want, but it's kind of hard to get because there's a set of there's a whole process you got to go through, as we've been kind of really just touching on in this episode. But each of these topics could probably deserve their own deep dive. It's a lot of stuff. So if you're beginning to make songs, or this was my thing, I was making songs for a while, but I just wasn't finishing as many as I want. I had way more demos and sketches on my hard drive than I did out there streaming or out there serving a project or out there actually doing something with a finished song. So if that's you, I've got a free guide that I put together. It's at finishsongsguide.com. It's completely free. It's just 10 pages, and it's just going to walk you through a simple workflow that you can use. You can either take parts of it and fuse it to the thing that you have rocking for you right now that helps you make songs, or if you're just feeling stale in your workflow and you're just looking for some new inspiration, you want to switch things up, that's cool too. You could try this out. It's just 5 steps, and it's going to walk you through inception to finalization. And I believe that if you were to go through this guide and do these 5 steps over and over and over again, you're going to get to the demo stage and finalizing stage a lot more than if you were just winging it without a process. So if you think that'd be a good fit for you, you can check that out. It's totally free. finishsongsguide.com. Man, well, hey, if you wouldn't mind as well, we love these conversations. We think they're very helpful. Would you let us know that they are? So we're not, because we could have podcastitis maybe, we're like, oh, this is so good. We're so attached, but we'd love to hear from you. Help us, is this helpful? Is there anything that we could cover or go deeper on? We absolutely would love to clarify anything that we can, because we're just out here too. We're fellow travelers along this musical journey. And we're honored and pumped that we get to talk about this stuff weekly. So please let us know, leave us a review. If you got some time, we'd greatly appreciate that. But with that being said, we will see you guys right back here very, very soon to nerd out even more.